they pay you for our coordinates, you bastard?
It's not like that. It was just a deal.
After you listen, subscribe, hit like, and leave a comment before we continue. The pink sun sliced through dust caught in the cracks of Saddam's shattered palace. Leah Morgan moved down the dark hallway, listening to artillery rumble somewhere far off. Everything here was plain and honest. Smoked-out paneling, scorched doors, crooked scrawl on the walls about the end of an era. She stopped at a blown-out window, wiped the glass with her sleeve, and breathed in the dust. The past stepped so close it made her chest ache. Leah was short, wiry, with veins always up on her hands. Her nose was a little flattened, like anyone who spent a long time in the ring. A fine scar ran across her left brow, making her gaze even harder. Her hair was tied back tight so nothing would fall in her eyes. Her stride was short and sure. She wasn't acting a hero, she just kept herself collected, the way she always had. Detroit taught her not to panic. In childhood, poverty and anger were normal. Boxing gave her a rule: don't look away and don't mix your signals. The night she covered her mother with her own body and hit her father, Leah understood something simple. Either you stand or you get knocked flat. She joined the army without any romance about it. She wanted out. She wanted order. There she found discipline, new hands beside her, and medicine that teaches. Move fast, move precise, don't waste time on pity. And all of it shattered in one night. After a live fire, she came back to the tent and met the eyes of the man who should have been a mentor. He used his authority and her trust. In the dark, the foundation of her new reality was ripped out. No words, only the cold fact of assault and the absolute silence after. Then came the emptiness. Not hysteria, emptiness. Her body reacted like to a blast. Ringing in the ears, pressure in the temples, fists curling on their own. Those first nights, she barely slept. She heard every creak of canvas, every step on the other side of the wall. Her brain hunted threat even where there wasn't any. She started sitting with her back to the wall, counting breaths, checking locks twice. Trust got hard. Touch a trigger. The smell of gun oil a trigger. A man's laughter too close also a trigger. The anger didn't vanish. It changed shape. She didn't smash things or scream. She took rounds in the ring whenever she could and drove herself to nausea. On the range, she held the sight longer than required. In medic training, she rebandaged mock wounds to perfection until her fingers went numb. It was a way to take back control. If you can roll a shredded bandage into a neat cylinder, you can roll yourself back together too. She didn't file reports. Not because she didn't believe in words, she just knew the system. She knew the looks. She knew how a light, "don't rock the boat," turns into months of rumor. She chose something else: survive, get harder, prove to herself that nothing would break her. It's not the right recipe, and it's not advice, just the choice she made at that point. Now, standing in the palace corridor, Leah drew a slow breath. The war had become heavy background, and her private war quiet and daily. She accepted a simple truth. Fear doesn't disappear. You carry it like a ballistic plate. It's heavy, but it takes the hit. She learned to notice the small things that pull you back to life. The warmth of a metal mug at dawn, the moment when the radio goes still, a brief sleep with no dreams. Small wins and enough to keep a day steady. Leah no longer called the army a family. For her, it was a tool and a zone of responsibility. Family was the few who wordlessly step beside you when things go bad. She didn't look for justice in grand phrases. She looked for it in acts. Cover your buddy, pull out the wounded, do the job cleanly and without fuss. The sun climbed higher. The dust sparked and fell. Leah adjusted her sling, gave the room one last look, and moved on. She wasn't stronger in spite of it all. She was strong because of what happened, though she should never have had to live through it. That's the plain truth, and it's enough to keep going. The summer of 2003 was closing in. The burning Iraqi sun was easing up over the horizon as Leah Morgan, tanned and squinting a little in the heat, waited for the convoy at a checkpoint choked with sand not far from Baghdad. The air stood still, thick with dust and the smell of fuel. Far on the edge of things, engines thudded low, the column was getting ready to roll. Leah commanded a small medical detail, a team of line medics responsible for evacuating the wounded from the battlefield. Ahead, on orders from command, their battalion was driving deeper into the desert, closer to the front. She slid behind the wheel of an armored Humvee. Inside, the heat was oven hot. Beside her were her closest hands: Junior Medical Sergeant Ben Sampa, Sapper Driver Jake Gardner, Radio Man Javier Rodriguez, and Scout Sniper Rick Gall. Everyone kept quiet, focused, the same tired look in their eyes familiar to anyone who'd done more than one run. Behind them were the barracks and two other medics. Corporal Ryan Kennedy cracked up, surprised, when Leah thanked him at the aid point for pulling together drugs and supplies. "I'm sure everyone's safe with you, Sergeant Morgan," Ryan joked, leaning over the seat. "As long as I'm around, no wounded gets left without help." Ryan Kennedy was one of the most seasoned soldiers in the battalion, charismatic and influential. His smile, like a small flame in the sand, always seemed to tell people everything would be fine. Leah gave him a short nod and faced forward. Her hands gripped the wheel, her legs kept a steady rhythm, the heavy Humvee hauled through the soft, wavy sand. "Another one stuck out on the flank," Javier repeated, peering into the distance. "This kind of quiet, you only get it before a big storm or before an explosion." "Maybe it's just dust kicking up," Jake said, but his voice was tight. He glanced back over his shoulder and smacked the dash with his palm. "Agreed, we stay sharp. Leah, you're lucky today you've already run your third morning evac without any amputations." "He's bleeding from a shoulder wound, so don't relax," Leah said quietly, eyes on the road. "Right now, the only things that matter are speed and a cool head. Medics will tell you, get the tourniquet on fast and don't panic." "We'll see," Ryan winked, bracing an elbow on the door. "With you, care turns into art instead of tragedy." "Art is when everyone's alive," she cut him off. His swagger annoyed her, but Leah didn't show it. Under that calm surface, something was already winding tight, the familiar prickle that comes before chaos. "Hey, Leah," Ben said after a minute of silence, "you think this run's gonna be long?" "Long," she squinted into the sun. "Look for yourself. If the trucks and the wounded are waiting on us, we'll have more than enough time." "Let's hope no surprises this time," Jake muttered. "I don't want another week in hell." "Nobody does," Leah said evenly. "But we're not here for what we want." Ryan smiled a little and tossed over his shoulder. "If our days were easy, they wouldn't call us soldiers, right?" "They'd call us lucky," she answered softly. Ryan shrugged like, "Suit yourself." They cleared the gate, and the medical convoy crawled along a torn-up highway. Dust mixed with hot air like someone breathing fire in their faces. The open flats ahead of Baghdad gave way to rocky rises and mounds where the sun punched straight into their eyes. Engines droned steady, the heat muffled every sound like the desert itself was listening to their silence. And then, with no warning, a column of smoke climbed far ahead. An explosion, hard and sudden, like a fist in the chest. The column braked as one. The Humvee lurched and slammed into the rig beside it. A shockwave tore the air as if a fist hammered steel. Sand shot up, hot grit-filled faces, eyes, mouths hell-burned from the inside. "Shrapnel," Javier shouted and dropped between the seats. "Stay cool," burst out of Leah. She yanked the wheel, but it was too late. The second blast wave slammed them. The Humvee skipped off the road, skidded sideways, and the tires bit into soft sand. And wide thump nearby, like the air itself popped. The world snapped into a hollow white hush. The second armored transporter lifted off the ground. Two trucks went up trailing fire. Metal rained like a storm, biting into the earth with the sound of red-hot iron. The air turned hot and choking. Everything smelled of blood, oil, and burned fabric. Ben barked once, and rasped shrapnel punched through armor and hit his shoulder. He sank into the seat, clamping the wound, blood running down his arm and vanishing into his sleeve. His eyes were glassy, his breathing ragged. Leah didn't feel fear, only a cold, fierce clarity. Everything around her slowed. The roar dropped to a dull backdrop, and her heartbeat became the metronome of action. Rick Gall flicked his eye off the scope and ran up, yelling through the blasts. Sergeant Morgan, left flank wounded. One's jammed in our carrier. Copy, she snapped and jumped out. The door slammed against the frame, heat slapped her face, smoke clawed at her eyes, and she didn't even blink. Sand crunched under her boots, fragments clattered nearby like a metal hail. She grabbed Ben under the arms and hauled him from the Humvee, feeling her fingers slip in blood, the fabric soaking through red. Ben, hold on, she shouted, pressing a hand to the wound. Trauma bag, tourniquet here. Jake scrambled out his side and tossed a bandage and a first aid strap. Catch, he yelled over the din. Thanks, she shot back. The strap cinched down with a gritty creak. She pressed, checked the bleeding was slowing. Her hand shook, but her movements stayed crisp, mechanical-like on the training ground when every second decides a life. We are not giving up, Ben ground out through his teeth. Shut up and breathe, she said flat. Steady. Do not black out. From the rear, someone yelled. Leah, fire left. The barricade's moving. We need cover. She turned shapes in the smoke, burning debris. And then she saw him. A silhouette she knew too well. Ryan. He was running. Not ducking, not looking back, not covering anyone. He took the rise and headed for open desert. He moved fast, sure of himself like a man who had already made up his mind. Ryan, she shouted, throwing a fan of dust his way. Where the hell are you going? We've got people here. No answer. Only engines, the hiss of bullets, and the groan of metal. His figure wavered a heartbeat in the haze and vanished. Leah froze, fists clenched. In her chest rose not fear, but anger clean and ripping, like red-hot sand. Demon, she thought, leaning over Ben to tighten the wrap. That's not running from death, that's running from a conscience. And as she cinched the bandage, she added to herself, and I'll remember who left ours behind. She hooked Ben again, dragged him behind the hull into the strip of shade, and looked around. Smoke ahead, cries from behind. She knew there was no time to think it over. If they didn't hold right now, help wouldn't be coming. Her lips barely moved. Work, to the last. When the fight ended, their platoon sat around small fires on the battered road. There were wounded and dead. Gear was strewn underfoot body armor, torn pouches, scuffed helmets. Javier pulled off a boot and wrapped his own leg, teeth clenched, sweat on his brow. Jake picked at the radio, back cover off, drying the board over the flame. Ben was already tugging on lighter kit covered in scrapes and peppered by metal but alive. His left arm cinched to his side in a sling. Leah's heart was hammering. She got back to work, helping her people and the column next to them. Medics set tourniquets, laid casualties on litters, splinted, and marked the time of application with a marker. Someone passed canteens. Someone collected used bandages in bags. The smell of smoke, blood, and fuel hung low like fog. One thing beat in Leah's head. No one else gets trapped like that again. In the jittery quiet around the fires, voices started. Morgan, a pale lieutenant, came up, eyes red from dust. I heard you were driving the evac through the fight. You did it right. What happened with Ryan? Word is, he never shouldered a rifle. Leah swept her eyes over the circle of bodies and shadows, a hallway of backs. The commander stood beside her. His flashlight skimmed the sand. Did he really run? Corporal Taylor whispered from the carrier. Behind him a dull voice. Did our corporal ever come back? No. He disappeared when the first wounded dropped. They're chewing up our recon, Leah said evenly. I saw Kennedy take off. Who? Sergeant Cobb snapped, lifting his head. Who'd you see? Ryan Kennedy. He ran. She met the lieutenant's gaze briefly. Someone sold us out. Taylor smiled a thin, nervous smile, as if to pardon the silence. Maybe she imagined it. The lieutenant scowled, swallowed whatever he wasn't saying, and moved on through the wounded, checking lists, names, status. Leah walked quickly to Ben, checked the dressing, distal sensation, pulse. Cobb leaned closer, lips barely moving. Everybody wants to live. Maybe someone fed the enemy the wrong grid. See what we're made of. She didn't answer. She checked the knot on the strap, tucked a blanket around the casualty next to him, dropped an empty Roman IV bag in a box. The air above the road still quivered with heat and the ghost of thunder. Someone burned a damp crate to make more smoke and less blood smell. Someone prayed under his breath. Morgan, the lieutenant again, now with a notebook. Report tomorrow. Sign off on the evac list. And if you've got details on Kennedy, submit in writing. I'll submit, she said. Just the facts. She stepped back from the fire into the dark, where the light didn't punch her eyes. Took a pull of water, burned her mouth on the warm canteen. Thought plainly, next time more smoke, faster marking, cleaner channels, and zero illusions. Night fell as they gathered around a fire at the open-air bivouac. Heat and exhaustion made heads spin, so Leah ducked into her tent to doze. But thoughts circled and wouldn't let go. Corporal Ryan, the arbiter, as some soldiers once called him, had opened the back door. How could he? A whirlpool waited for her, lying in ambush. The feeling of gunfire laid across her nerves again like a throbbing ache. Everyone's got their own line, that's what they say, she thought, unsure. Sleep never came. Next day, her platoon flew wounded out by helicopter from the fight. War didn't wait. The American flag was already hanging over plenty of strategic sites. At the battery's field command, the lieutenant climbed back into the dugout from a jeep and nodded to Leah. Morgan, you moving again? Next tasking is on your tablet. We're pushing closer to the city of Baghdad for a palace clearing operation. Leah's heart jumped. She tightened her grip on the strap. Saddam's palace. The same one that had been all over the news just last month. Their team was being sent there to expect anything, and she realized Ryan couldn't not have known that. In her mind, the night steps surfaced coordinates that could lead them straight in. Leah watched the shift roster spill a map across the tablet. Above that grid sat entries Ryan had keyed in himself. A chill of certainty ran up. The bloody intervention was only getting closer. That evening, when most had dropped into sleep, Leah walked into the forward tent with the maps. Nobody at the desk. Wind banged the canvas. The tie-downs rattled. She sat at the staff computer. On the screen, a note about a voluntary call in on the radio net, and a coordinate she knew like a bruise blinked. In the remarks field, buyout company, and a short code. After that, everything lined up. What is this? She said aloud, without surprise. A flare cut red through the flap's little window. A figure slid by outside in a mask. Leah's hand went to her holster. The shadow bolted. She shoved the chair back, grabbed her pistol, and dove out of the tent. A few short shots. Leah slipped under the line of fire, snapped a strap across the shooter's face, wrenched his arm, and pinned him in the sand. Metal clicked, the weapon skittered away. A round had scored his shoulder, a grown, warm blood. Behind the mask Ryan Kennedy. He blinked, eyes blown wide, mouth open. A hot casing hissed nearby. What do you want? He rasped. Me? Leah dropped her knee across his wrist, dragged a tourniquet high on the wound, and cranked down hard. You're going to tell me what you wanted. You sold us out. You called us family and fed us to a firing line. You don't understand. He fell into a half-whisper. I had debts. They were on me. I had to step out. For a while, nobody was supposed to die. For a while, she snorted once. 3 of ours are in bags. That's not for a while. That's forever. They threatened me, he gritted. You don't know what it's like when the choice is either you or you hand over your own, she cut in. She laid the printouts in front of him. Radio log, call signs, buyout company, transfers. Signature yours, code yours. He swallowed, sat up a little for a second, tried to piece a calm mask back on. Others get paid too, he rasped. They pay them straight. I just took a different path. I don't owe anybody anything. You owe, she said level. You owe every person you left under those blasts. Every family. Everyone who hauled the wounded while you ran. Shut up, he snapped, trying to yank his arm free, and the tourniquet bit down and drew a cry. "You're not spotless either. You go off book when an order squeezes." "The difference is simple," Leah leaned in. "I don't sell my own." He screamed, surged. "No, get off." "Enough," Leah snapped. When officers ran in on her call, Ryan was on the floor. Other soldiers were hauling him out by the flak. Sergeant Morgan felt the cold inside. Long before command decided on a punitive op, she had collected all the proof: copies of messages, informant IDs, audio of calls about selling grids. Ryan got a formal investigation, but orders crawled. Turned out he was pushing data through cutouts under a front company's name, and he moved cash during pullbacks, stuffing bills in his pockets while others dragged casualties. It's done, Leah thought. She looked drained, but coals still burned in her chest. No one could give back the blood of her people. Toward evening, the column rolled for the ruins of the former palace where Saddam's guards had a last hold. Broken columns, rusted shards, walls with scorched tile, everything under a heavy sunset that turned the sand to copper. Leah, now in reserve to provide medical care, was posted on a temporary platform near the entrance. Ryan stood not far away. He was under guard, but they let him out for a watched, on-site interrogation. One arm in a sling, the other trembling, a lighter flashing in his hand. He leaned on a shattered column. Their eyes met brief, heavy. "You know," he said quietly, "you'll arrest me anyway. You'll put a period at the end. Prove I'm a war criminal." "I'm just following the order," Leah said evenly. "You can do it now." He gave a crooked smile. "Good place for an ending, huh? A dead general's palace, smoke everywhere, like a parable." Leah stepped back once. Wind dragged the smell of oil and burn. The gun line closer short bursts cracked. The radio called contact with insurgents. She signaled the team, prepped to fight. When the shooting started, everything blended into one roar. Leah was laying a dressing on a casualty when something blue close by flame licked Ryan's face, and he lunged for a weapon. Someone shouted, but Leah was already out of cover. "Ryan," she called. "Stop. We can still finish this without blood." A round smashed into the wall behind her, showering chips. Leah ducked. Smoke veiled her eyes. Her heart thudded dull and heavy. "You're the traitor," his voice came back. "I just wanted to survive. They got paid us. They promised only death." "They gave you honor," Leah answered, clipped. "You burned it." He yanked the sight up, eyes furious and broken. "You're all the same. You think you're clean. When the system throws you away, who helps you then?" "Not you," Leah said, and stepped forward. The firing ran on. The air was heavy, overheated. They ended up in the atrium among broken columns and dust. Insurgents sent short bursts. Bullets sang past, chipping marble. Leah moved on instinct fast and low, pressed to cover. Fragments slid under her fingers. She saw Ryan through the smoke. He shook, clutching the rifle, eyes no longer angry but scared. Leah felt nothing, only that cold clarity. She knew this time it would really end. The hammering didn't stop. Her head rang. Rounds tore off plaster, turning the writing on the walls to powder. The air cut with smoke and scorch. When the fire paused for a heartbeat, Leah stepped out and faced Ryan. "How much did they pay you?" she asked, quiet but hard. "Nothing," he exhaled. "I had to. Avoid losses. My own." "Avoid losses," she snapped. "You abandoned your own. Medics risked their lives, pulled people out, and you sold trust and left your buddies under fire." She caught his eyes. In return, emptiness and anger. "Spare me," he managed. "You're nobody's hero," she cut him off. "Except maybe to the ones who paid." Bursts flared again in the ruins. Echoes rolled the atrium and died. When the shooting dropped away, Leah knelt by the wounded Ryan. The tourniquet was already high on his arm, bleeding under control. Her hands were bloody and dusty, his wrists tied with plastic cuffs. "I betrayed," he said, barely a sound. "I sold out. It's on me." Leah checked the strap, tightened the knot, wiped the wound with gauze. Good you said the truth. Too late, she said shortly. It won't bring people back. He blinked and went quiet. Whatever held him together went dark in his eyes. Leah froze for a second. Sirens flicker, smoke patterns, faces of her platoon like frames seen through a helicopter window. Soldiers rushed the atrium. 2 medics lifted the litter. Move the wounded, a crisp command. They raised Ryan and turned him over to the MP detachment. Leah felt the tremor of fatigue in her hands. She checked the closest casualties again, marked the dressings, and then climbed onto a litter herself. The blast wave had caught up with her. The helicopter chewed up the sound of the ruins. They pulled everyone back to the stabilization point. That night, protocols, short interrogations, blunt signatures. At dawn, orders from upstairs. Kennedy to face court for treason and for the consequences of the last op. Leah to be called as key witness and evac lead. She just nodded. No commentary. Work goes on. Within a few days, the fighting ebbed. Ryan Kennedy was in fact arrested, but at the last minute, the case got rewritten. The protocol now said excessive use of force during the firefight. The part about selling coordinates quiet. Leah didn't get spared either. Excessive harshness toward the enemy, a phrase that softened the charge but basically ended a career. They demobilized her fast, no ceremony. Detroit met her with ordinary morning air and the quiet of a front step. She slept in scraps. Every trash truck clatter felt like a helicopter spin up. Every door pop like a blast. Mornings she ran the block, cold cutting her lungs, her heart humming a fine vibration. Days she worked with her hands so she wouldn't think, washed dishes, fixed a cabinet, packed a just-in-case kit. Evenings the TV on mute. Meeting Cassandra was like a sharp inhale. A clinic hallway, a plastic bench, the bite of antiseptic. Hey, Leah, how are you? Looking for meaning. For now, I'm helping people in the same pit. Talking is hard. I know, Cassandra said and hugged her. Come to group. No one asks for more than you can give. She went. At first, she said nothing. Then she started running the field segment of the meetings, showed how to put on a tourniquet, how to stop bleeding, how to breathe when it hits. She didn't talk about heroics. She spoke straight. Fear isn't shame. The guilty aren't always in the paperwork. And living on is work too. A letter from the military prosecutor arrived in the spring. Kennedy's case is closed, conviction under the excessive force article. No details. She slid the letter into a folder and left it there. Her war with him had ended long before. In time, small anchors appeared. Morning coffee without panic, a route to the store without checking over her shoulder, sleep that lasted 2 hours in a row. She learned to step onto the balcony in the city noise without counting possible cover. On the group's wall, she hung a simple marker poster. Alive, that's us. From here together. A year passed. Leah led weekly meetings for women veterans and a couple of widows. In the parish basement, they kept folding litters, tourniquets, a few training mannequins. Her hands no longer trembled when she tightened a strap on a plastic limb and said, "Stop the bleed 2 minutes. Then we breathe." After sessions, someone always stayed to talk about hallway silence, about the dark in the head, about the guilt of surviving. At home, she had a small box, patches, a dog tag, a platoon photo, a printed floor plan of that palace, and a sheet with a short list of names. She read them softly, without ritual, just so she wouldn't forget. When newcomers asked, "Does it get easier?" Leah answered straight. "I can't promise easier. It gets clearer, and you find people you can walk with." At the summer retreat, she stepped outside before everyone. Sun slid along red brick. A distant commuter train hummed. Leah leaned her back to the wall, closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long while felt her breathing even out. The fire inside her hadn't gone out, it had stopped burning her up and started giving light. It was enough to hold a beam for those still wandering in the dark. She went back into the room, nodded to Cassandra, and, as always, began with the simple things. Let's check tourniquets. Then how to talk when you're scared. And remember, we're not alone. It was enough. For today, and for tomorrow too. Hit like and don't forget to subscribe. The next story will be even more intense. But if you are under 18, don't even think about clicking next.